Well, welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. This month we're very excited to have Brenda Koch with us. Brenda's a part of the senior management team here down at Billings Public Schools, and this has been an interesting year in public schools, no doubt about it. So Brenda, thank you so much for taking the time to come down and visit with us about the school year that's about half over.
It's my pleasure to be here, Shoots.
All right, thanks. So we're going to talk a lot about the different aspects of what's gone on so far in public schools. But before we do that, let's get a little background about you. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? Give us a little history.
Sure. So I grew up in Lewistown, Montana, on my parents' family ranch there. It was a great place to grow up, and just always had a burning desire to be an educator. We didn't have television when I was growing up because we lived way out in the boondocks, and so reading was very important to me, voracious in spending my time that way when I couldn't be outside. And I also recognized the value of public education, and my family certainly didn't have a lot of money, and I knew that education was the key to opening doors for me, as well as then I wanted to be able to give that opportunity back to everyone else. And so I became a teacher, went to school at Montana State University and majored in English and history. I started my teaching career at Laurel High School in 1995, and I was on a cart. I had 7 different preps, and I had a closet for an office. It was an experience, to say the least. I loved it. It really just kind of dove right into the teaching world, and did a little coaching as well. And I was fortunate enough to be able to return to Lewistown, and where I taught at the high school, and I coached high school volleyball, and then I had an opportunity to transfer to the junior high at that time, so I could have some experience with middle school students and work under an amazing principal. And he was the person who seemed to recognize in me that perhaps being an administrator was something that I should pursue in my career, and so I did. So I've served as an acting principal, middle school principal. I've been an elementary principal. I've been a K-8 superintendent. And then in 2011, I was lucky enough to join the Billings Public Schools District Administrative Team, and I've been here ever since. So it's been a great experience.
So tell us a little bit about your role. How do you kind of fit into Billings Public Schools, and what is it that that your office, and talk a little bit about how your office is split up, and then what is your guys' role within the school district?
Sure. So we have 2 K-12 executive directors. Kathy Olson held the position for many years. At one time, she'd been the elementary education director, and then it was changed to K-12 when I was hired. And we split the district in half, and we oversee half the schools. Upon Kathy's retirement, then Dave Cobb was here for a couple of years after coming to us from West High, and currently Randy Russell, who is a former superintendent in the state of Montana and last year served as an assistant principal at senior high, has joined our administrative team. So he has the west cohort. I oversee the east cohort, which is comprised of elementary, middle schools, and high schools in the Heights and half of downtown. So we really view our role as leadership support, servant leadership. Our job is to help principals be able to reach their potential, continually build their capacity, problem solve. Our job is to help support teachers in the classroom so that they are successful and they're able to meet the needs of their students, so that we can provide a quality education for the students in Billings Public Schools. So it really is a servant leadership approach to what we do in each and every day.
So tell us a little bit about what your expectations of the position were before you took it, and then we all get into a job and it's a little bit different than what we think it is. So what have you found the position to be once you were into it?
Sure. So at first, I don't even know if I had a real set of expectations. I probably had more of a set of expectations of myself, of what I needed to do to be successful and to earn the trust and respect of my colleagues. And for me, that was first seeking to understand, learn how the system works, because it is a large system. Understanding how to have seamless communication, access to resources, all of those ins and outs of a very large school district, because most of my experience had been in a Class A school system. Once I became more familiar with the district and got to know everyone and just really felt at home and felt like I had a family surrounding me and that I was working with, then really diving into the academic data and being able to recognize growth opportunities and the challenges that were presented with that. And then the one that I really wasn't anticipating was the need for the bond. And when we had to build middle schools and refurbish our elementary schools and just all of the multitude of facets that were involved in being able to have a successful bond and learning about architecture. We were to the point where I was walking in an elementary school and looking at how I could turn a closet into a classroom. And so to be able to go beyond that and to see what we have today, and we're so grateful still for the community in helping us achieve our goal and really improve the learning environment for students, has been remarkable. And since then, it just has been going on with finding and recognizing the new challenges and opportunities to grow, and really right now focusing on the student achievement within the PLC framework and how we can improve the student outcomes, and also with our CTE and what we can do to help students be able to recognize careers that they may be interested in and providing entry points into those careers. So. Yeah.
So we're about halfway through the school year. Christmas is kind of a traditional, but I know the semester doesn't really end until about this time. So we're about halfway through, and I think everyone kind of knew going in that this was going to be a bit of a different kind of crazy school year. So walk us through a little bit from your perspective. We've had different guests, but from your perspective, how did the planning kind of get started for this, and what did you know you're up against? What did you didn't know you were up against? Talk to us about how you saw this coming together.
Sure. So really, last spring, I always say the world completely changed for us on March 16th. As we knew it, and we were all thrown into an arena that there's no playbook for. We had no past experience on decision making and how to move forward and how to provide support and comfort and reduce fears and still continue with some structure and normalcy and education and putting that all together. And our staff in the school district were absolutely amazing. The way that really on a dime we were able to flip and provide some form of continued education for our students and to allow our teachers to continue to work. Last May, there was really a turning point of whether we could return to school for those last few weeks, and we just weren't in a position to do that. But I do think graduation provided hope. Jim Duncan and the Billings Clinic, they just came together, and I'll never forget the meeting at the Metra, and Mr. Duncan looked at everyone and said, we need to have graduation. We're going to figure out how to make this work, and we did. And it wasn't without some challenges and some fears, but to be able to watch those students graduate and cross the stage, and for their families to be able to still see that we went from not having any graduation to having a graduation in a matter of a couple of weeks, and it was amazing to watch that happen, and the community was so supportive and respectful of what we needed to do. Then in the summertime, we were able to have some summer school programs, high school credit recovery here at the Lincoln Center. We had a middle school program running at Riverside, and then an elementary program running at Orchard. And what that allowed us to do was to be able to see what kind of safety protocols we could put in place on a smaller scale, how students responded, how teachers responded, parents. So it was a really nice opportunity to do some exploration. During that time, I did tons of research, reading articles and reopening guide documents from other school districts. We really modeled our reopening guide from a school district in Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. They did an amazing job. They obviously had the resources to pull a document like that together, and then meeting with our own medical personnel on a regular basis so that we could figure out what the best model was for Billings, for our community. And we were able to finally land on offering two platforms. What we have today, the remote learning for teachers and families that needed to be able to have for whatever reason their family faced, to have an opportunity to learn and work from home in the remote platform, as well as providing the in-person learning, because we have families who the parents need to go to work. They're not able to work from home. What we do know is students learn best in the classroom, and so to be able to provide that for them. It was challenging in designing that. I know there was a lot of frustration in the community, saying, why can't you make up your mind, make a decision faster? And as the virus kept changing and the numbers kept changing, and it was hard to finally land. And the superintendent always says, he goes, Mrs. Koch always says that, it was like standing on the high dive and having to jump off, and we just did. And luckily, it's been fairly successful. Again, I always say challenges. It certainly has provided many challenges. It hasn't been smooth in every aspect, but I'm really proud of the way our staff has stepped up and embraced this to the very best of their ability to provide the education for our students, to provide that well-rounded environment for them where they feel safe. When I'm out in the buildings, the one resounding theme I hear over and over from teachers is thank you. Thank you for opening schools. Thank you for letting us come to work. Thank you for letting students be in the building. And I'm really proud of that. And of the parents, they've been super supportive. They understand that we have protocols we have to follow to keep everyone safe, and they're doing that respectfully, and they're helping us out. And we're just very grateful for the way that it's turned out. It could have gone the other direction, and thank goodness it certainly didn't. One of the major challenges for us at the district level was in August restaffing. So once we finally landed on remote and in person, in a matter of a week and a half, we had to completely restaff the entire district. And that was a challenge. Mr. Russell and I, we joke about how we didn't leave the Lincoln Center for a couple of weeks. We turned 216 and we called it the war room, because we had whiteboards up and white chart paper everywhere, and we were on the phone. Teachers, thank goodness, they were answering their phone at night when we'd call them and say, I'm sorry, but we need you to go to this school and teach this subject. And they're like, okay, whatever we need to do. And it was really, to watch people come together during a time of need was pretty inspiring. So
what were your guys', I know you're talking about this, what were the expectations of, how many students are going to choose to come back in the building and how many students are going to choose to be online? And then what did you guys see actually once, that the doors were open or the computers were open? What did you actually find out?
So we sent a survey out to the community to see how many people would be interested in a remote learning platform if one were to be offered. And at that point, about 30% of the respondents said that they wanted to come to an online remote learning type of a platform. We ended up with about 2,500 students, which is still a significant number. It was a little lower than we had anticipated or projected, but really that's fine. That was just fine. And we were able to identify Mrs. Becky Carlson. I think you've spoken with her.
We've had Becky on.
That's great.
She,
boy, talk about a young lady that just jumped into the fire. One day she was an associate principal at Medicine Crow, and the next day she's down here building a program from the ground up. And I'm just very, very proud of the work that she's done. It's been phenomenal, and she has put in countless hours in answering parents' questions and students' questions and helping teachers, and because this is brand new for so many of us. I checked today with what our enrollment is, since we're at the start of the second semester, and we're at about 2,250 students. So some of those students from the original 2,500 have returned to in-building. So with that, we actually are adding regionalized K5 classrooms in the district to accommodate for that overflow, because our classrooms we staffed at a certain capacity so that we can still maintain some social distancing to the very best of our abilities, and we don't want to overcrowd those classrooms if we don't have to.
So I know, this stuff changes kind of on a consistent basis, but again, we've touched on this a little bit. It's about halfway through the year, and I know when you started, you said, here, if you're going to start here, you're going to go here. But I think everyone understands it's a fluid situation. So did you notice that there was going to be an uptick in kids who, they chose to be online and it's just not working for them for whatever reason? And they really wanted to have that transition back into the classroom. What were some of those discussions like, and how, you touched on it a little bit, but how are you accommodating that throughout the school district? Because it's not, it might be a first grader here and a sophomore there,
Right.
and it's not, oh, well, these 30 kids are coming back into fourth grade.
Right. So at the high school and middle school level, it's a little bit easier because they have more flexibility with scheduling.
Sure.
And so we've been able to really accommodate the majority of the requests to return to in-person learning at the middle school and high school level without having to create any significant changes.
Sure.
The elementary is much more challenging. So, but we also recognize that we want to be able to have room for these students to return.
Sure.
Many of them haven't been in school since March 16th of last year, and in preparation for next year and their future years in education, for our little people, just being able to relearn school. How you stand in line, how you follow the protocols in a classroom is completely different than what you may be doing at home in remote learning. So anytime that we could accept students back into their home schools, we have done that. Every school is a little bit different based on the square footage of the classroom, what the current enrollment is. So Mr. Russell and I have really relied on the building principals to help us make a safe decision on whether we have enough space or not for a student to return to a specific classroom. So hence has come about now the regionalized classroom. So today we've added a 2-3 combo classroom at Eagle Cliffs in the Heights, and we'll be accepting students on Friday there.
Sure.
And then 4-5 combo classroom at Bitterroot in the Heights. The Heights right now seems to be where the majority of students are wanting to return to in-person learning for elementary. And then we're looking at some additional potential classrooms in Midtown as well to accommodate those needs.
So as those folks come, I mean, this is gonna get us into a broader issue.
Okay.
But as those students are coming back, and I know you guys are trying to track this all along, but what have they lost, gained? Where are they at where they're supposed to be? How is the first part of these students coming back going to be, where are you at? And then trying to get them to where they need to be.
Absolutely, Shoots, you're right on. And then the golden ticket is, how do we assess that?
Sure.
So we just completed our winter benchmarking for NWA for 3rd through 8th grade. That is a great assessment. It's just a little snapshot of where they're at in English language arts and in math. And so the students that did participate in that on the remote side, we can use that data to be able to at least give us a somewhat of a preliminary indication of where they're at. We will be having conversations with their remote teachers of where they're at in the scope and sequence of our district curriculum and how that student was performing within that scope and sequence, the pacing guide. Our little primary students are going to be more challenging.
Sure.
We use what's called FastBridge as a benchmark assessment for them in person. We're not able to do that remotely. And so we're going to have to be doing some diagnostic assessments with students when they return, and this is where that expertise of the teacher is really going to come into play. But one of the challenges is going to be students are going to be coming in at all different entry points.
Yeah.
And so when I was visiting with the teachers that have been placed there yesterday, I said, this is going to be interesting, and you're going to have to be flexible, be able to identify what those gaps are, work with the resources within your building to help fill in those gaps, and then the same at the middle school and high school level. But I do, one thing I want to say is about with the professional learning community framework that we've embraced in Billings Public Schools is we have good pacing guide, scope and sequence of, especially in the core curricular areas, of where teachers should be at specific points of the year. And by running these two different platforms, two different systems almost, that has been a lifesaver for us. So we're pleased that we had some infrastructure in place, some proficiency scales, some common assessments that we can now use that data to help identify where these students are at, because there are going to be some gaps that need to be identified.
And then are you going to try to use what's going on with these particular classrooms that's coming back to, I'm assuming next fall you guys are mostly planning for school as usual, but that you still have 2,200 students, which is not a small school, right? That is not a small school that will be coming back, I would assume, most likely back into the classroom, and maybe some of these tools will be useful. And you can pilot them in what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've learned about this is we, as educators, and then I guess to back up, I said last summer to the leadership team, I said, education has forever changed because of the pandemic and what's the old adage of necessity is a mother of invention. And so what teachers have been able to do has certainly opened their eyes to other ways of providing instruction or providing access to instruction and resources if a student is gone, if they're on a vacation, and things are now posted in Google Classroom. And many teachers were doing that before, but we have a greater percentage doing that now. We're on Seesaw for our elementary students. So being able to restructure some of that, looking at flipped classrooms where the students at home in the evening are accessing the digital resources, and then during the day in the actual instruction, it's more of a facilitation and using a model like that instead of the reverse, which we used to do. So it certainly is allowing for more creativity. One of the things that we've also learned from this, though, is that you can't solely rely on technology for learning, and that there, some of the basic rote automatic things that need to take place for reading fluency, the math automaticity are critical, and that's hard to replicate online. But we're really wrestling with what will next year look like, and we haven't exactly landed on a final answer. We want to see what happens with the virus within our community, what our medical professionals are recommending to us, listening to our parents and our teachers, and bringing all of that information in to be able to decide what next year does look like. So we don't have an answer yet, but it'll be fun.
Along those lines, are you evaluating maybe there will always be a component of online learning in School District 2, because I know there's kids who struggle, and there's a lot of kids who struggle. But I know there's also kids who this is the best school they have ever gone to, and they're thriving, they're doing well, and they love every aspect of it. Now, I don't know what percentage that is. Is that enough for you guys to do that? Are you guys having those types of discussions as well?
Yeah, and so anecdotally, I've been able to participate in some remote teacher evaluations, and the household structures that are able to provide a learning environment that is conducive for remote learning, those students appear to be achieving at higher levels and progressing through the learning progressions at an expected growth rate. The students who aren't in that situation are definitely struggling more with engagement and being able to keep up with the work. Really, remote learning, you have to be a fairly independent, motivated learner for you to do well. One of our great researchers that we love in education right now, his name is John Hattie, and he's fabulous. If you ever have a chance to visit with Kim Anthony in our curriculum department, she even has a shirt that talks about John Hattie and has his picture on it. But in his research and his meta-analysis, what he learned is that remote learning across the world only has a 0.18 effect size. And a hinge point really is 0.4. Anything below 0.4 isn't as effective. 0.4 or above, you're really making some gains with students. So I think that comes into exactly your point, that the students who are thriving in that environment are a much smaller percentage. Now, how do we say you can be in remote learning or you can't, or or this is the best environment for you but not for you? That's a tough one, because families also have very unique needs, and we recognize that, and we want to be able to work with them too.
Sure, absolutely. So given all of that, maybe give us some of the things. What's one more thing you'd like to accomplish before the end of this year is over? One of the things that hey, I'd really like to see this get accomplished while we're still in this weird kind of situation?
So I think the greatest thing that I want to see accomplished is that we finish the school year without closing a school. The odds were against us. The largest school district in the state to have over 14,000 students in-person learning. We've had to quarantine classrooms. We've had lots of the close contact tracing and lots of students who've been quarantined multiple times, which has been disruptive. But we haven't had to close a school. Knock on wood, because I don't want to jinx myself.
Sure.
But if we can do that and be able to have a solid assessment at the end of the year of where students are at, I think we'll be in good shape. We are planning to have summer school, K-12, for students who need some gaps filled in, who need some extra assistance so that they're more on track when they come in the fall when we restart. And that's more than just credit recovery at the high school. It really is going to be identifying the learning gaps and providing that assistance for them. So we'll be bringing teams of administrators, teachers, and the parent voice of what that will look like for each level. But that's what we'll be embarking on this summer. So that'll be a big undertaking here the next couple months.
All right. Pandemic, no pandemic, however you want to see this, gaze into your crystal ball a little bit. What do you see coming to Billings Public Schools next 3 to 5 years? What are some of the big issues you guys are going to be wrestling with?
You know, I think we're going to continue to see an enrollment growth. Right now, this year we lost 600 students to homeschool. So regaining the trust of those families and having them return to public school is certainly something that I'm very invested in doing. The CTE piece of, I think it's important that the message is sent to our students that it doesn't have to be college or career. It can be both. Or if you choose college, that's great. If you choose a career, that's great. There is no negativity in that at all. And being able to provide the introductions for our students into multiple career opportunities, opening their eyes to the possibilities, letting them explore that in a real life experiential type of an atmosphere more than just looking at reading an article about it or a little abstract. So really expanding on that. One of the burning priorities is our funding. You know, when last spring, when we had to have some severe cuts and we had to reduce our FTE, I was a person that had to deliver that information to teachers, to large teacher groups of what we were needing to do, and it was really hard, and it was hard on me as well as the teachers that we were visiting with, and so becoming fiscally solvent is one of my priorities. I publicly said, now that I know about this problem, I will be a part of the solution. And so I'm committed to that as well.
All right. Well, Brenda, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us today. I know this has been a kind of an incredible school year.
It has been.
So thank you to all of you and the staff at Billings Public Schools for all the hard work you put in. I know we're a lot of times not knowing exactly what's going on, but that didn't stop people from working hard to try and do the best to educate our kids. So thanks to you and all the staff for doing that.
Thank you. I'm very proud of our staff.